Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Skillshare with the Transformative Media Organizing Project. That's all of us. You can see here, everybody say hi. What's up?
Hi.
Hi.
And we're really excited today. We have Nollie Jenkins Family Center is going to do Skillshare with us. Live from Mississippi.
Good morning. I want to thank everyone on Hangout and watching live for joining us in this creative community conversation where we'll address systemic violence, plucking the roots of systemic violence, and violence in our schools and the effects of corporal punishment in our schools in Mississippi and 18 other states that still use corporal punishment as a form of discipline. In today's conversation, we want to look at the commonalities between the states that still use corporal punishment and uplift alternatives and solutions that we need to punishment. Inside this Skillshare, we want to look at the connections between the state system, schooling, and homes to understand the spread of violence. To set the tone for today, I want to share a video that our young people did when they presented to the Holmes County School District with an audience of parents, students, pastors, teachers, and they shared their experiences around corporal punishment.
Continuously spreads a mentality that cripples the potential of our girls. Family has to go. I felt embarrassed, ashamed, belittled, worthless, disliked, and I felt like I didn't want to come to school anymore. I will describe to you about the time I got followed. I am Krishiva Robinson, 6th grade student and youth organizer with Nollie Jenkins Family Center. I got followed because the computer lab teacher disliked me. She took me by my uniform shirt and pulled me to her desk. Then she bent me over and started paddling me in front of the entire class. While she was paddling me, she called me all types of names, like ugly and dumb.
You say that's happening in our schools. Lord.
So as you see, this young 6th grader who is breaking down emotionally as she tells of her experience getting paddled by a teacher inside of the classroom. This is why the fight must continue. This is why we must find solutions and alternatives as a community involving the schools, parents, and students to how we look at discipline and ultimately violence inside of our schools, which transition into violence in communities. This Skillshare is hosted by Nollie Jenkins Family Center. We are a community-based organization. We are a community-based organization in Durant, Mississippi, serving all of Holmes County. Our work fosters community leadership and developing youth to be leaders and organizers inside of schools and communities. Our work is intergenerational and centered around building young people. Many of our programs include our prevention of schoolhouse to jailhouse, and our environmental justice campaign, and our women's and girls initiative, to name a few. To learn more about our organization, please visit our website at www.nolliejenkinsfamilycenter.org. Today we'll be diving deeper into our campaign to abolish corporal punishment and the work that we've been doing since 2012 to get rid of corporal punishment, not only in our schools, not only in Mississippi, but the 18 other states that still use corporal punishment as a form of discipline. We encourage all of you to get involved in this conversation with us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at NJFC for Community and on Facebook at Nollie Jenkins Family Center. If you post, please use one of these hashtags: Solutions Not Punishment, Stop the Violence, End Corporal Punishment, and Violence Doesn't Stop Violence. I have two other wonderful facilitators with me today, Miss Janice Harper, who is a community organizer, and Ellen Reddy, who is our executive director. And you'll be hearing from them in a few about our campaign and the overall statistics of corporal punishment inside of our schools and other schools across the South.
Good morning. This is Ellen Reddy, the Executive Director for Nollie Dinkins Family Center. The Corporal Punishment campaign is important. As a matter of fact, as a child in public school in Georgia, I was administered corporal punishment. But at the same time, the principal, I have a twin, and the principal spanked my twin for me. And he realized then that that practice needed to stop. So I am over 21, and that was probably 40 years ago. Corporal punishment can be abolished in school districts where you have committed teachers and principals who believe in community and who want to raise young people who are skilled leaders inside their communities. First, I want to talk about the Holmes County School District Corporal Punishment Policy. Corporal punishment, as defined by Mississippi Annotated Code 3711-57, Section 2, students is permitted as a disciplinary measure in order to preserve an effective education environment which is free from disruption and conducive to furthering the education mission of the school board. Corporal punishment shall be administered only after less stringent measures such as counseling, parental conferences, and other documented forms of discipline have failed to produce the desired outcome. Any corporal punishment must be reasonable and moderate and may not be administered maliciously or for the purpose of revenge. Such factors as size, age, condition of student, the type of instrument to be used, and the amount of force to be used, and the part of the body to be struck shall be considered before administering any corporal punishment. In grades 9 through 12, corporal punishment shall be administered by the school principal, assistant, or the school principal's designee, and shall be administered by the same gender as employee as the student. In grades K through 6, corporal punishment may be administered by the school principal or the school principal designee. When corporal punishment is administered, it shall be in the presence of another certified employee. The superintendent shall develop a form to document disciplinary actions taken. Such form, at a minimum, should include the nature of the disciplinary problem, efforts to resolve those problems, and the final action taken. And I leave you with a caveat: except in the case of excessive force or cruel and unusual punishment, school principals, any school personnel shall not be civilly or criminally liable for any action carried out in conformity with state, federal law, rules, or regulations by the State Board of Education. I read the policy because that is what the policy states. However, we know in all school districts, the practice is very different from the policy. Oftentimes, young people are given the option of taking the paddle or being suspended. We even had a saying by our principal in our district that said, take the wood or go to the hood. Young people can be paddled for minor misfractions, such as raising their hands in class to ask a question, what they call defiant disobedient, which is very subjective. They may be paddled for walking down the wrong side of the hall, for showing up to school tardy, or for showing up to school without the appropriate uniform. And here recently, we put in place a uniform code that says children must wear a black belt and black shoes. How ridiculous are we getting when it comes to those zero tolerance policies that push young people out of the school? And I want to share with you some of the statistics for Holmes County. The Holmes County school student enrollment is less than 3,000 students. As a matter of fact, it's 2,974. Percentage of black students is 96%. 96% of those students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. School district poverty is 54.3%. That is defined as the percentage of school-aged children within a district who live with families below the U.S. poverty threshold. Children in single-parent families are 72.2%. Overall children poverty in Holmes County is 62.1%. And I add those stats because we're talking about children. Those statistics represent the children who are living in Holmes County and who expect to receive a quality education. But some of the root causes of those things are, for example, we have inexperienced teachers who are not prepared to teach where they're placed. They're not being prepared appropriately in education training programs. New teachers are not equipped or to operate in a culture such as Holmes County or in high poverty schools. There is a disconnection. Although many of the teachers are from this community, we still have a class pecking order. There's a hierarchy. For the most part, employment in this county is at the Holmes County School District. So you can imagine if you're working for the school district that your position around children may be very different. I want to continue to share some, and I want to slow down because these statistics are kind of intense. So I want to share with you, Mississippi has the highest percentage of students being beaten by educators than in any other state in the U.S. that allows corporal punishment. In Holmes County alone, in the 2012-2013 school year, there were 351 paddlings. Now, please understand these numbers are underreported because certainly from young people coming to Nollie's, we know that there is more paddling going on inside the school. The number of black students and white students enrolled in Mississippi public schools are nearly equal. However, black students are more likely to receive corporal punishment 3 times over that of white students. Before I go on, in any state that's still using corporal punishment, children with disabilities and children of color are more likely to be paddled than any other students inside that school building. I want to talk a little bit about this relationship between violence inside of schools and communities as it also relates to domestic violence, both nationally and inside of Mississippi. You should have a slide in front of you that looks at, this information was reported from Wendy Mahoney, who is the director of the domestic violence shelter here. A few days ago, she sent me this information. 1,653 victims have died to domestic violence in the state. Of those, as you can see, 138 of those females were 18 and under. 169 of those females were 65 or older. So you can see all along this age continuum, women and girls are at greater risk for domestic violence. Here's one that looks at female homicide victims. We looked at a total of 1,679 females who knew their offenders. For example, 14 of those victims were Asian. 47 of those victims were American Indian or Asian. Black women totaled 494, and interesting enough, white women died at the hands of their partners at greater numbers at 1,126. For female victims, the method by which they were killed, 1,509 of those victims, female victims, were killed by were killed by their partner, someone who knew them. 92 of those females were killed by a stranger. And I do want to interject here. Men and women both die at the hands of their partners. However, females die at a greater rate than males. And so the slide looks at the victim's relationship, again, to the offender. 489 of those victims were murdered with a gun. 700 and one of those victims were engaged in an argument at the time they were killed. 926 were either wives, girlfriend, common law wives, or partners, while 355 of those were killed with handguns. And so while we cannot say that there is a direct cause from corporal punishment to domestic violence or violence inside the communities, we know that if we do not give young people the tools and skills that they need, they don't have a resource to go to when there is conflict. Young people can learn this stuff. I mean, you know, they can be critical thinkers. We can give them the tools and skills, and that is the only way we're going to decrease the violence inside of our communities. We want to now just talk briefly about the 19 states that still allow corporal punishment in the United States. You should have a map in front of you. That map is shaded in those 19 states where there is still corporal punishment. However, in the text box, we also highlighted those states who are considered red states, that are for the most part Republican run or controlled. And one final note, we discovered through human rights that according to the Human Rights Watch, there are 4 states, Mississippi, Texas, Georgia, and Alabama, that makes up at least 60% of students paddled in public schools. Interesting enough, Julie Worley, who is one of our partners who's been doing this work much longer than Nollie's, sent me a video yesterday, and it was a video of the little boy in Georgia, the kindergartner, who the principal and assistant principal spanked in front of the parent who video recorded. But that video ran on one of the TV stations this morning, the one with Charlie Rose, and it was interesting. You know, people were kind of offended that the child had been spanked, but there were more questions around why the child had missed 18 days of school. Even when I read the comments, you have people commenting, you know, he should have been beat. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of changing people's hearts and minds around the intent of corporal punishment. We know it does not change behavior, but as Kertivia said, it can be degrading and really do damage emotionally to children. So, and then there is some commonality around those 19 states. We know that corporal punishment is still allowed in public and private schools. Boys are still more likely to receive corporal punishment. It is still upheld and supported by most parents inside of those 19 states. And again, corporal punishment is disproportionately administered to black students more than whites. However, I think we need to do some more investigation. What is going on with those states? In Arizona, I know the Advancement Project is up there doing some disenfranchisement work. So there are some things that's going on in these states that we really need to analyze and step back and then do an analysis and continue to do this work. Thank you all.
So I know there was a lot. We really want to hear from you via social media about your thoughts around corporal punishment and the states that still use corporal punishment. You can engage with us on Twitter at NJFC for Community and on Facebook at Nollie Jenkins Family Center. As we transition into our next part, we'll be retweeting and sharing some of your thoughts via social media.
Good morning, everyone. This is Janice Harper, community organizer with Nollie Jenkins Family Center. I want to share how Nollie's actually developed the abolishment of corporal punishment campaign. We know that violence is an act that happens inside of our homes, inside of our schools, and through our communities. And it varies from family violence and can also become gang violence. These acts do occur in public places, in our neighborhoods, where all of our youth may gather. We know more personal forms of violence we experience begins in the close privacy of our own homes and is often spurred by a simple misunderstanding that will lead to an argument between a parent, between the child and the parent, and then what happens, it grows into bigger fights. Parents have been known to verbally and physically abuse their children. These acts are considered forms of violence. Verbal abuse, for example, could affect a child in a lot of ways. And then that could lead to the child acting out and taking matters into his or her own hands. This also may result in them hurting themselves, others, and hurting others either inside of their homes or outside in communities. So we do see a need for this to stop. It must stop. But one of our major concerns was the increasingly tragic level of violence that was occurring inside of our schools. It puts students, teachers, and administrators in our community at risk of physical endangerment. It also interferes with the desire to learn. No particular group that we are aware of has found a way to escape this trend. It can involve males and female students at all levels, K through 12, and it happens inside of the bathroom, hallways, school gym, locker rooms, and at sporting and social events. These episodes of violence results from factors that are both internal and external to our schools, such as in the home, beefing amongst students, favoritism, and or any other petty problems. In some instances, students do exploit, and they literally do attack other students. We don't know why, that's for various reasons. Other cases inside schools, students can be verbally attacked by their teachers, their administrators, and it simply may be for asking too many questions inside the classroom or disruption activities inside the classroom. So in essence, escalating violence in our community, including our school, has become a social emergency. Students, teachers, parents, and administrators, we all must get together to work and prevent these from occurring. So the ultimate goal of Nollie Jenkins Family Center is to study, to learn, to develop programs and activities that will lead to the decreasing violence that is in all shapes and forms in our schools and our communities. Nollie's also dealt with strategies around how the program would move forward. So what we did is we wanted to know what was really this situation, what's already out there as far as corporal punishment. So we researched the literature review. We've educated others about what we have found through our community through a series of meetings. Our young people decided to start carrying around with them violence journals where they were documenting forms of corporal punishment, violence inside the schools, their homes, and communities. If it happened outside in, like, say, a supermarket, any retail stores, if they saw it in cars and on playgrounds. Surveys were conducted with students and parents, so there was a lot of community outreach and door knocking by our young people. Once they actually brought the surveys back into the office, it was really interesting to see our young people, and I uplift them at this point for the tremendous great work that they did. They analyzed the data. They also conducted some one-on-ones. And inside of this process, our violence statement was actually developed. We recruited and enrolled other youth organizers and leaders into the program. Again, we convened a series of community dialogue with community to hear from them as to what their thoughts and feelings was around corporal punishment. We engaged students, parents, educators, public and elected officials to address alternatives to the violence. There was some video recording that was also done from students who had actually experienced corporal punishment. You saw a brief clip of that with Kershivia Robinson, one of our youth organizers. And there were monthly presentations that were given before the Holmes County School Board. So when we talk about alternatives to violence, Nollie Jenkins Family Center has a Scholars of Peace peer mediation program that is a program based community-based service learning program for social change. There's action research that promotes positive social economic change inside of our communities. And again, the goal of the program is to gauge those K through 12 students, parents, and schools in community-based service learning experiences and special student design projects that will address social and environmental needs. The peer mediation program as a solution was a program that was adopted and designed to develop knowledge, develop skills, and to value youth organizers and other students within our community. It also could employ the insurance of peaceful approaches to resolving disputes and conflict that lead to violence. It also can enhance students' strategic learning skills in social research, data analysis, collective decision making, communications, and valuing another person's perspective. And we also, through our program, have a curriculum that speaks to the program workshops, the intense hours, the research that young people will have to actually do, the assignments around the program, the workshops. We deal with elementary, middle, and high school students. There is a training around needs assessments, administrative support, peer mediation coordination, and a collaborative implementation, planning, and design of the program. I do also want to share that inside of our peer mediation program, I believe that Ms. Ellen may have spoke to it a little bit earlier when she talked about actually with the corporal punishment and the violence inside of community, how do you work to collaborate and keep and engage, not just engage, but actually get people to actually hear and understand the tremendous problem around violence. So this year, February, I met with the new superintendent of our district and presented the peer mediation presentation to her. She was really impressed with it, and next steps is actually to now present that to her again, along with her administrative staff. So we're going to be moving along, and again, as Misha has said, if you're live with us, you're in this piece, this live share, please acknowledge hashtag in corporal punishment. We need solutions, community-driven solutions. Violence equals violence. So we just need to hear from you all, share your thoughts with us. So that concludes my piece.
So as we transition, we want to hear from those of you who are on Hangout. We have some guiding questions to guide us in this participatory piece. Those of you who are live, please feel free to engage with us on Facebook and Twitter. But for those of you who are on Hangout with us, we want to know, is corporal punishment still used as a form of discipline in your schools and state?
Can we mute it?
Hi, this is Diana, and I don't know if it's being used currently in my state, but I do remember when I was a child growing up in Indiana that they used to paddle kids, and I didn't actually realize that that was considered corporal punishment because it was such a normal thing that was happening in the school. So normal that when it was a student's birthday, they would pull a student and jokingly paddle them, so they would make them think that they were in trouble and then give them a piece of candy, make a loud racket in the hallway so the whole class would think that someone was getting paddled, but actually it was a joke. So listening to you made me realize that that culture was instilled in a way that made me think that it was completely normal for adults to hit people, and it was completely normal for adults to make jokes about hitting youth. And so I think I didn't really realize that until listening to you all. So it's kind of intense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I think one of the things that makes the abolition of corporal punishment so challenging is that young people are desensitized to it. Just like you said, you didn't see anything necessarily wrong with that. So over a period of time, we can become desensitized to those things that are important to us. You know, think about the human dignity of a child inside of a school building. Everyone knows why the child is going to the office. You can hear children wailing down the hall when you walk into a school. I can remember being in one of the high schools, and you know, they were beating a child on the back of the school, but I could hear it all across the school, and it really is dehumanizing in many ways. Because again, when young people are in their developmental stages, those are the kinds of things that we use against each other. You know, we can always find that one little nugget that will push the button. So thank you for your comment, Diane. I appreciate that.
But one of the things you said was you wasn't sure whether or not your state still use and administer corporal punishment inside of your schools. So we have a really good tool for everyone who's watching and engaged with us. It's called ocrdata.ed.gov, and you can go to this website to see a lot of issues, but in particular we want to look at corporal punishment. So when you go on the site, you go down to state and national estimations, and this gives a breakdown of all of the states and the use of corporal punishment in any form of discipline inside of the schools, and it's supposed to be reported to this website, and is put up for community organizations for people to go and see what are the numbers. Now, in doing this work, we have realized that a lot of the data is like 2 and 3 years behind, as you see here, and that's something that we really have to look at ourselves to see how do we begin to be our own data collectors and keepers and make our own graphs and charts so that we can show what's really reflected inside of our schools and communities. But this has been a good tool to use and to show us the numbers as it relates to corporal punishment inside of all states, not just Mississippi. So once you go down and click state and national estimations, you want to go down to discipline. So when you go down to discipline, you have the option to go to your particular state, but for this webinar, we want to go down to corporal punishment. And it gives you an Excel document to open so that you are able to go deeper into it and see the numbers. And we just encourage, you know, everyone who's watching, if you're not sure if this is something that your state still does, to use this tool to not only find about corporal punishment, it has suspensions, you know, showing how students are being pushed out of schools. So,
Could you go to the corporal punishment piece?
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna add. I know for Georgia that we do allow corporal punishment. Though different school districts can decide to not partake in that. So I know Atlanta public schools don't allow corporal punishment, but as a state we do. Within the whole state, there are many school districts that do, particularly in some other areas.
all right, thank you for sharing. So it breaks down corporal punishment first by the number of students who receive corporal punishment who have disabilities in each of the states. And surprisingly, even though we said that there are only 19 states who still allow it, many of the states that you see on the screen still have numbers being reported around students receiving corporal punishment. So, okay, so if you look at, let's look at Georgia. The students with disabilities who are receiving corporal punishment is about 2,500. And like we said, we know that these numbers are not at where they should be because the reporting is not done. But it also breaks it down into the number of female to male ratio students who are receiving corporal punishment, as well as a breakdown of race inside of it.
And that's for students with and without disabilities as well. Just bear with us.
It's not acting right.
It's a tool that they can go back to use.
Say it.
Okay. It is a tool. It seems to be not acting right for us this morning, but it is a tool that you can use to look at data that's going on in your state, and it breaks it down to school district level as well. So it's an interesting tool to just play around with and explore, and give OCR feedback in terms of how it may be better developed together, the kind of data that we need to use inside of communities.
Right. And again, that website is the Office of Civil Rights Data Collection, ocrdata.ed.gov.
I have a question. Because I'm looking at the spreadsheet and looking at the 19 states that you mentioned before,
Right.
and that there's only out of the 50, or out of all the states that are represented here in this spreadsheet, there's only 2 that say that there's no corporal punishment at all.
Right.
So are there any, if there are no policies around, like, corporal punishment being, like, outlawed, does anyone have, do you still have leverage to, like, hold these schools accountable? Because it seems like if all these states are reporting corporal punishment is happening, like, what are ways to, like, hold these places accountable that don't have particular policies that allow it?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think first you need to definitely do an investigation at the state level. What does your state legislature say around corporal punishment? And then look to your local district. Is there policy in place that speaks to corporal punishment? If there is not a policy in place that speaks to corporal punishment, then they should not be administering corporal punishment, and it needs to be brought to the attention of your school board, because the school board has local control when it comes to, at least in Mississippi, we have local control. And so those are the places I look at: your state level, check in with your Department of Education, and then your local school board. And then develop a campaign, go and speak with your school board to address those kinds of issues. And again, when you look at those numbers, oftentimes children with disabilities are disproportionately administer corporal punishment. So sometimes what we may be seeing, for example, children who may have disabilities are oftentimes restrained and secluded. So some of that data may be drifting over into there as well, because I don't know. They should have a value around restraint and seclusion in that data. So those are the places I look.
Thank you. What does it mean for your communities to still have these policies exist around corporal punishment? And further, how does this impact communities of color? So when you even go back to the statistics that are shown, it really shows the amount of African American females that are getting beat. Say, for instance, inside of Mississippi was, I think, 7,500 versus the white female students was about 1,500. So how do these policies impact communities of color specifically? And this is for if you're watching live, please feel free to engage with us on Twitter at NJFC for community. And we want to hear from you all on the Hangout. How do you think corporal punishment and violence further impacts communities of color?
One of the things I want to kind of put out is that even when you look across, if it's not corporal punishment, look at the way that resource officers inside of schools now treating children of color. It's consistent. There is little value placed on the life of children of color inside of school buildings. Anytime a police officer can snatch a girl child out of a chair, slam her to the floor, handcuff her, and so I see a consistent pattern. Whether it is corporal punishment at the school building level, whether it is having police and SROs inside of our schools. Ms. Janice attended our strategic planning meeting a few days ago, and they're even putting forth that we need drug sniffing dogs inside of our schools. And so we see these really harsh policies being put in place, particularly in schools where there are high numbers of children of color, whether they are Latino children, Asian children, Black children, children with disabilities, and poor whites. So there has to be a common ground where we can meet, where whether your issue is disability or some other issue, I think that we can work together to combat this problem. Again, it has to do, I think, a lot with the value we place on a child of color's life. So I just want to put that out there for some additional dialogue. And I think we also have to look at, in the state of Mississippi, the Holmes County School District has been persistently a failing school now for probably 5 or 7 years, or even longer. In areas, rural communities like Mississippi, we have a teacher shortage, which means that a certain percentage, a high number of our teachers are teaching out of their content area. Many of our teachers, we discovered, particularly at your low grades, only have 0 to 3 years experience. That's not considered a qualified teacher in the state of Mississippi. So we really have to look at who's inside of these classrooms, what's going on with monies for professional development, and we really have to, I think, be vigilant inside of school buildings when it comes to protecting the rights of our children and helping our children to understand that they have rights. Even inside of a school building, they still have rights, and how to assert those rights.
One thing I wanted to say is that I actually didn't know that Georgia schools still did corporal punishment. So this is actually new information for me. It just makes me think of just kind of the ways in which state violence comes at the hands of both administrators and SROs, and I'm more wonder what how do, like, kind of the way that y'all are talking about the kind of just like intersectional anti-violence campaign, both around stopping school push-up, but also stopping corporal punishment.
Mm-hmm. Can you repeat your question again?
Can you have a question?
Oh, okay, your comment.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, how you, given kind of connection between SRO and school police officers' violence and corporal punishment, how are y'all building kind of like a multifaceted anti-violence campaign?
Okay.
In Holmes County?
Yeah. One of this coming school year will be the first time the school board has really considered placing school resource officers inside of our schools. We're also a part of the Dignity in Schools campaign. There are some kind of guiding principles. If resource officers come inside of our school buildings, they need to come inside of the school building with more of a prevention approach versus a punitive approach. So that's one of the ways we're thinking about engaging with the board. If we're going to have resource officers, they must go through a training that speaks to young people inside of our communities. What are their needs? They need to understand that their role is not punitive, that their role should be supported. They should know the resources available in the community. So if young people are having challenges, they can be referred to some resource that could support them. So we're really looking at being in more control of how they enter the schools and what their roles will be inside of the school buildings.
And I think also us making the connection when we talk about, plucking the roots of systemic violence, how, as it is now, we don't have other alternatives to discipline. And so one of when Ellen was reading the policy, and it says, if the other solutions don't produce the desired outcome, like, what does that mean? What is the desired outcome when a student misbehaves or does something that you feel is right? How do we look at what are the desired outcomes? And if you're not giving them peer mediation skills and how to resolve conflict, then it directly relates to, a teen who grows up and doesn't know how to deal with conflict, and then an adult inside the community who doesn't know how to deal with conflict. So we're saying if they have these tools and skills are inside and engaged inside of conversations that talk about how do I deal with the violence, or acknowledging that I may be a violent person, but how do I deal with it instead of me being beat and punished for something that I feel or something that I do. How do I make sure that I have the tools and skills that I need to be peaceful inside of my school environment and further inside of my community? And I think, it is a direct relationship. And we can't say that, it's not until we give students the opportunity to be a part of a space like this and see what the outcomes will be. And we've seen that a part of Nollie, a part of our Scholars of Peace, taking them through understanding violence, the nature of it, and being able to be their own peer mediators, because we have a no-hit zone that we uplift inside of all of our spaces. And we only work with like about 20 to 30 young people, but think about the impact something like this will have inside of the schools, and on violence in schools and communities. So I think we're definitely dealing with the intersections and making sure that when we talk to these stakeholders that we're uplifting the intersections. Yes, it's corporal punishment, but further is violence, not just in schools, but also inside of communities as well.
Can I mention something? Because I think you just made a connection for me by saying that, and when you were saying what is the outcome, that was that's really deep, because it's right. Are you to what extent are you punishing people, and how are you shaping folks, and that can be such a convoluted thing depending on people's values and priorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really see your approach as this approach that the late Grace Lee Boggs, a mentor and elder of ours here in Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
would say that I transform myself, I transform the world around me.
Mm-hmm.
And that just still makes so much sense in this context. So really thinking that it's not that you can discipline someone to an end, but that you give someone the skills to be able to transform themselves, and then that transformation has a ripple effect. And so I made that connection and just wanted to say that I think that's a really powerful approach.
Thank you, and thank you for uplifting Mrs. Boggs as well. Thank you. Yeah, and the reality is many of the adults don't have those skills, and I think that's the other part of the conversation we have to have. We cannot tear down a system or dismantle a system and not build it up again. So we really have to engage in real dialogue and honest dialogue with teachers, because oftentimes they don't know what to do. I was talking to one of our program officers Sunday night, and he was talking about his wife was a teacher in South Africa, and they were talking about removing the paddle, and so many teachers resigned because they didn't know what to do. You have to strike this balance between having order in your classroom, because all children deserve quality instruction. And so if you have students inside your classroom who may be disruptive or who may not, for whatever reason, that needs to be addressed. And so we really have to get adults to recognize that they have legitimate power. And some of this is really about power and control. And even as an adult working in an intergenerational model, I've learned from young people. They learn from me. And so we really have to engage each other in that way, that we can share stories and learn lessons from each other. And it benefits the broader community, not just one person.
So, and then I mentioned our permeation and our Scholars of Peace as one of the solutions and alternatives, but we want to hear from you all. What are other solutions and or alternatives that need to be uplifted as a part of this process and implemented inside of our schools? So for those of you who are on Google Hangout, you can unmute yourselves and engage. For those of you who are maybe watching live, tweet us at NJFC for Community and on Facebook at Nollie Jenkins Family Center.
Let's talk about some.
Okay.
So who are we fighting? We're fighting a lot of folk around this corporal punishment issue. We're fighting the Supreme Court. that ruled that students attending public schools can be administered corporal punishment. The Eighth Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment does not protect them because they are school children. We're fighting around the 14th Amendment, which gives students right to due process, because if that is a policy, then that is your due process right. You've been told you're in a fight, you're going to be spanked. So we're fighting at the federal level. Any federal legislation that's been enacted around ending corporal punishment has failed, has died in committee. It started in 2010, so from 2010 until now, each year there's been a piece of federal legislation written, but it never comes out of committee. At the state level, an example in Mississippi, there is immunity for school personnel if in the administration of corporal punishment, as long as you follow the policy, you cannot be civilly or criminally held liable. We fight local school boards. In Holmes County, we've got 3 ministers on our boards, and we know inside of churches, we still take the position, spare us for the child. The rod of correction will drive mischievous out of the heart of a child. So we have these deeply rooted pieces in communities that makes it very challenging to remove corporal punishment. So we're fighting a lot of people. We're fighting parents. We're fighting folk who said, yeah, they ought to be beat because I was beat. You know, we had a conversation with some of our legislators, majority men, who say, well, it happened to me and look, I turned out great. We know that's not true. So we're fighting a lot of people around the removal of corporal punishment, but I think the target has to be getting rid of it at the federal level, then the state level, and then getting the Supreme Court to support that children should be treated the same as any child or person inside of an institution. You cannot administer corporal punishment. So why are children in public schools exempt? What's that connection? Because there are federal dollars that come down? Why is the Supreme Court holding that position?
Right, so it's hard to go into a school and say no corporal punishment because a lot of the times people don't want to sit down and really address, you know, that violence is an issue, and this further promotes violence inside of schools and communities, and further to sit down and have a discussion between parents, community organizers, activists, principals, everybody involved inside the school environment to really look at what are solutions and alternatives and come out with something that we all can agree on for the betterment and the good of children being able to have the tools and skills that they need in order to deal with violence. So we've been doing this work for about since 2012, and there are resources out there. There are organizations who say, I'm against corporal punishment, but we want to urge people and push people to take a stance around corporal punishment. We're circulating petitions, and this is a first of a series of webinars because we really wanted to dig deeper into this issue of violence and moving forward to get rid of corporal punishment. We've had articles published in the Heckinger Report that talked about violence inside of Mississippi and across the South, and different students voicing their experiences, getting corporal punishment, seeing other people, students being beat inside of the schools, and how that affects the learning environment. The
article in front of you is where an 8th grade student took his school district to the Mississippi Appeals Court. The Appeals Court rejected the lawsuit and said he did not have standing. That's Ingram v. Wright.
The ACLU has posted a violent education, which talks about corporal punishment inside of schools, which is a great tool and a great read for people to understand corporal punishment inside of schools in the South in particular. And Southern Echo has been instrumental in creating maps that look at the breakdown of race and gender dynamics when it comes to violence inside of schools as it relates to corporal punishment and violence in a broader sense. So there are resources and other organizations who are doing some of this work, but we're looking at really building momentum and pushing to get rid of corporal punishment inside of our schools and replacing it with community-driven solutions and alternatives. If you want to continue engaging in this conversation, please do on social media. We'll post a link to our petition on our Facebook and on our Twitter page. So if you support us, please click on the link to sign your name on this petition to get rid of corporal punishment inside of Holmes County in our school district. And engage in conversations about violence. Talk about violence to the next person, to anybody. Let's just engage in conversations about violence, because when it's not talked about, it's like not seen, not heard, or you don't want to address it. But let's begin to address violence, and you will see how it directly relates to corporal punishment and violence inside of schools. Our work continues. We're continuing to do this work. Our young people are in the process of now developing and revising our violence statement, as well as our humiliation courses, and laying out who are our supporters and who do we need to talk to as stakeholders and as gatekeepers to getting rid of corporal punishment inside of schools. You want to end with a quote?
And I will end with this quote. We have a powerful potential in our youth, and we must have the courage to change old ideas and practices so that we may direct their power toward good ends. That's a quote from Mary Bethune, and we can make this happen.
So we want to thank everyone who is watching live, as well as all of you who have been participating inside of this conversation on Google Hangout. Support this work, support our work, and support the students inside of schools who deserve an education and who deserve a quality learning environment that does not include violence. Thank you for being a part of this creative community conversation, Plucking the Roots to Systemic Racism, hosted by Nollie Jenkins Family Center. And I just want to acknowledge that we have some of our young people in the room that we took out of school to be a part of this webinar who are tweeting. And some of these young people have been working on, they were some of the young people who presented at the school board and are part of this campaign. So y'all say hey.
Hey. Say hey.
Thank you all for tweeting, for your comments, for being a part. And look for our next webinar. Just follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We'll be posting links. This conversation will continue. This fight will continue.
Thank you so much. This was so powerful. And everyone who's watching, definitely check out the resources that Nollie has made available around this. And you can join us next month at the next Transformative Media Organizing Skillshare at transformativemedia.cc, and this was recorded, and so you'll be able to, look at the video and get those links, all those resources, and the facilitation guide is also available online. So thank you again, everyone at Nollie's. This was really powerful, amazing, and everyone who participated in the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.